Hello and welcome to Health Talk. I'm Wang Mengmang. In this special edition of our program, we focus on ALS. You might have heard about this disease through the Ice Bucket Challenge or inspiring personal stories that made news headlines. While this disease affects approximately 2 to 3 individuals per 100,000 people worldwide, there's currently no cure, but there has been significant progress as scientists continue to tackle the complexities of the diagnosis and treatment of ALS. And today we are very delighted to have an esteemed panel of guests. Joining me are Professor Fan Dongsheng from the Department of Neurology at Peking University Third Hospital, Mary Tsakovich, inaugural Executive Director of the Massachusetts General Brigham Neuroscience Institute, and Dr. Tsakovich is also Director of Healy and AMG Center for ALS at Mass General Hospital. Albert Ludolf, Senior Professor of the Department of Neurology at the University of Ulm. And we are also joined by Aaron Gittler, Professor of Genetics at Stanford University. Thank you so much for joining our discussion today. So let's begin our discussion with a very timely news event here in China because, Professor Fan, we know that one of your patients actually received this tofersen injection earlier in June, and she became the first case in China to undergo this targeted therapy treatment after it gained market approval. So what significance does it hold for ALS patients as well as scientists in this field?
这个治疗呢，非常重要的是第一个针对病因的治疗。
Because it is the first treatment targeting the pathogenesis. Because in the past, we're just focusing on some of the mechanism and also some of the symptoms of the disease. And because you know that for the ALS is caused by the genetic mutation, so for this treatment is targeting for the pathogenesis. So it gives us a lot of the inspiration about the treatment. For example, it feels like we have conquered a very big challenge. And in the future, we will have more methods and try to provide more treatments. For example, the fast gene, and also we are working on some of the other pathogenesis mechanism. We will continue our efforts. So this time it is a very significant effort we have made so far and give us a lot of hope.
Dr. Tsakovich, we know that you have expertise in pathology, and it really plays a key role in helping us understand the causes of ALS. Are there currently any breakthroughs in trying to find out the pathology of the disease?
Yes, there are several breakthroughs. We know many of the genetic causes of ALS, and even for people who do not carry a gene, we have better understandings of what is happening in their brain and in their tissues that we can then target with new treatments. So there's lots of research going on around the world.
And of course, can I also have your insights into this, Professor Ludolf, in terms of the causes and your understanding of this? Because we know Germany has a long story in trying to improve neuroscience research. Could you share some perspectives on the current studies on this?
I'm very interested in the worldwide epidemiology of ALS. For example, the incidence and prevalence of ALS in China and in Germany or Europe is not the same. Of course, the genetic background differs, but also history tells us that the epidemiology of ALS changes in parts of the world. For example, I've been working in Egypt or Mongolia, and the onset of the disease is much earlier than in Europe or North America. So these differences may first be interesting, and secondly, also give us a better understanding of the entire disease worldwide.
And what about you, Professor Gittler? What are some of the key breakthroughs in treating or delaying the progression of ALS? And what are some of the latest findings in your lab that you think hold the most hold the most promise or significance in this field?
So I think the discovery that you mentioned, that Professor Fan treated the first patient in China earlier in June with a drug called tofersen, it really is a breakthrough. So that started over 30 years ago when a gene was discovered that, when mutated, causes a familial form of ALS. And then scientists worked over the years to figure out what goes wrong when that gene is mutated. And they figured out that that gene has some sort of toxic property. And they designed a drug to go into the nervous system and find that gene and turn it off. And they were able to deliver that to the nervous system. And it shows that it could stop the disease in people that have that problem. And there are many people in China with ALS caused by that gene mutation. And tofersen is the name of this drug. And now that it's in China, I think that is a breakthrough for people living with ALS. In my laboratory at Stanford, we're continuing to study other genes and other ways that can cause ALS. And over the years, we've discovered some additional genes that we think we can learn about how they work and design medicines to either turn them off if they're doing something bad, or make more of them if they're not doing enough.
And this medicine, this treatment, we just mentioned tofersen. We know that has been some kind of delay since it gained market approval, gaining access to China, and then the actual treatment. 所以樊教授想请您谈一下，我们当中的这个时间段为什么隔了这么久
delay of the time
造成
to put the drug into market. In 2024, in September, the tofersen drug has been approved. However, it takes some time for the drug to come to the market. It takes some approval time. But because of the trade war between China and US, and it caused some of the delay. And then in April, and this drug is about to enter into the market. But now we work together and try to accelerate.
What are some of your expectations for this treatment? 您期待它会产生什么样的效果？
因为对我们来说，这个对这部分早晚这个突变的这一部分病人呢，我们
For those like ALS, like patients with the genetic mutations, it will help. This drug can target the pathogenesis, and this will help to delay the progression of the disease, and also to reverse some of the symptoms. And according to the research from the experts, for some of the patients, they have very long progression of the disease. For example, this person have like 10 years of progression of disease. But after this person take drug, and after 1 year of recovery, this person able to walk. And so I think if we have enough time for the recovery and also do some exercise for these patients, we believe that this drug can help them to cure and to control the disease and the severity of the ALS. So this time, by having this opportunity, we would say maybe we can take it as a chance. We could find more opportunities to cure this disease.
Dr. Stankovic, I'd like to have your thoughts on this. Just how promising is this new development here in China in the field of the research and treatment of ALS?
I wasn't sure if you asked me, but I'll answer first. This is a huge breakthrough. We have been treating patients with this drug now since it came to the market in the United States, and it's the first time in my career that I've seen people stop progressing and get better. Now it's not everybody, so there's more work to be done, but at least 40 to 50% of people, if they start this drug early, are seeing remarkable effects. So this tells us that ALS is actually a curable illness if we can develop treatments that really shut down the cause of it. And that's just so exciting and so hopeful for the field.
And also early diagnosis is so important for the treatment of ALS. Professor Ludolf, just what are some of the key challenges in achieving early diagnosis of the disease?
Yeah, like I emphasized, first it is interesting to look at different ethnicities and countries in the world, because the course of ALS and therefore early diagnosis might be at least different. And secondly, of course, we have to avoid misdiagnosis if we want to diagnose early. We are doing a current study together with Professor Fan to compare early diagnosis in China and in Europe, and trying by this to avoid mistake, increase specificity.
And then, Professor Czekovich, what are some of the current early diagnostic biomarkers for ALS?
So our best one still is the what we call electrophysiology, or EMG. We know that that changes early in the illness, but we also now have some potential fluid biomarkers such as neurofilament, or sometimes in spinal fluid we can measure things called cryptic exons. These are all some of them are research and some are commercially available. But they're helping us understand the what happens early in the illness, and to be able to intervene earlier with our patients. I think in the next couple of years, or maybe even sooner, we're going to have a whole panel of tests that we can do to diagnose earlier, and ultimately we even want to diagnose before people have symptoms.
And Professor Gittler, we know that your lab has used this yeast models to study ALS-related proteins. Could you explain to us how it really works in practice, and what does this protein misfolding mean to research?
It seems like a crazy idea to use yeast to study a brain disease. It's just, this is the same yeast that you'd make bread with or beer. But it turns out that a problem in the brain and the spinal cord of people living with ALS is that clumps of protein build up, and we think that those clumps of protein cause problems. It turns out that yeast cells also have trouble dealing with clumps of proteins. But it's a very simple system, and we can put those clumps of proteins that were in the nerves of people, and we can put them into yeast cells and figure out how yeast cells are dealing with it, and then come up with strategies to help nerves do the same thing. And through those studies, we've identified genes that were originally in yeast but work the same type of way in the brain of people, and that's led us to think about strategies for medicines.
Mm-hmm. And we know that Professor Fan started focusing on early diagnosis of ALS decades ago. You began very early, and at that stage, it was easily to be confused with some spinal cord problems. Yeah. Has any progress been made since then in terms of diagnosis?
Just as this professor said, during the diagnosis, we still need a standard for the biomarkers. It's hard to say if you test the blood and then you can diagnose it with the ALS. We don't think that is the standard, so we think the EMG is very important for us for the early diagnosis. But this is just a routine EMG. And right now, we need to find a way for early diagnosis as opposed to diagnosis. And right now, we are working with other experts in China to use AI technology, help us to analyze the signals of the EMGs. And sometimes when we look at some of the imaging, we are finding for some areas, maybe we already find some abnormal elements. But EMG still play a key role for us, but that is not sufficient enough for us for the early diagnosis, because it can only show the abnormal elements like after ALS already occurred. So maybe in the future we will find more ways for diagnosis, but it is very difficult to do that because the mechanism of ALS is complicated. It's hard to say how to make an early diagnosis because the pathogenesis is quite different as opposed to COVID or other kind of disease. But we need to have the biomarkers help us to stop the progressing of the disease. So that's why we are using the toxin. But we think that for the toxin is very conducive for us to find out the diagnosis.
Professor Fan mentioned with the assistance of artificial intelligence, scientists are taking this one step further in diagnosis of ALS. Just how critical are these new emerging technologies in helping us deepen our understanding or enriching our understanding of the disease? Professor Ludolf.
Yeah, I think the biomarkers which we now develop that Merit mentioned pave us the way into the future. It is not only neurofilaments. There will be earlier changes, for example, of synapses, and these changes can be analyzed, for example, by artificial intelligence to find out an earlier diagnosis and eventually, of course, this is a dream, prevent the disease.
And your thoughts on this, Professor Gittler? What are some of the new technologies? What are their roles in the diagnosis and treatment of ALS?
I'll mention two. So AI is very exciting. I think about it now in my laboratory every day. And as a field, we're very good at generating large amounts of data, collect large amounts of data. We're less good at finding connections between those data. AI is very good at finding connections between these data and generating new hypotheses, new ways for us to test. For example, over 1 billion people in China use WeChat every day, and there is lots of information there. And if we can make connections between those, we might be able to find earlier and earlier signs of ALS and then come up with ways of stopping it. The second area that I'm very excited about is in biotechnology. We have great medicines, but it's challenging to deliver them into the brain and the spinal cord to get to the right nerves where they need to go. So engineers and doctors and scientists are working on ways of packaging medicines into particles, sometimes even taking a virus, but making the virus so it doesn't cause someone to get sick, but it delivers it to the right cell at the right time. So those are the cutting edge areas that I think are moving the field forward.
And these new technologies are not only valuable in the diagnosis period, but also in terms of perhaps, managing pain, slowing progression, and extending lifespan as well. So, Dr. Setkovich, what other technologies show promise in helping individuals with ALS?
We're seeing right now real innovation all over the world in how we test drugs or new therapies. So how we're doing clinical trials. We're learning from our colleagues in cancer about how to accelerate discovery of new drugs. So, for example, there's now global efforts to do something called platform trials, where we test multiple drugs in the same infrastructure, and we share data from people who might get the placebo, and we share the infrastructure so we can cut down the time to getting new therapies in about half and by 50%, and cut the cost by also about 50%. That's just one example, but there's many more examples of how people are using technology or innovation and AI to test drugs faster in people.
I might say two more ones that. So one of the terrible parts of ALS is people with it eventually lose the ability to speak and communicate. And new AI technology can listen to recordings of that person's voice and create that person's voice. It's a perfect replicate. And then they can use machine to track their eyes, and they can communicate in their own voice with the rest of the world. And there's also a technology where it's called brain-machine interface, where electrodes can be attached to the brain, and it'll allow someone living with ALS to be able to move objects in their environment, whereas they wouldn't be able to do it. So these are things that are today helping people around the world that are living with ALS.
It really is an important step in helping improving the life quality of individuals with ALS, because communication is key. When they reach a certain stage of that disease, they lose communication or speech abilities, but you can still get the messages across.
在这方面，我也想介绍一下我们最近做的一个和鲁白老师
Have a introduction
工作。我们根据这个用这个
about a new discovery,
智
a
能
new
对
work.
Physical 这个公司，它用这
So
个
we're also
AI
working one
在
with
这
the
个
company
以
to
往的老
use
药
AI
的
technology, and also we select a new drug among those old drugs. Maybe it is more targeted to this medicine, and also we will have clinical trials to our patients. And we know that this is an old drug, and we know the targeted areas. So with the AI analysis, we know that for some of the patients, they may suitable for this kind of drug. So we just pick like half of our 120 patients to have clinical trial of this drug. If we look at the result, it's very encouraging and interesting. We could see a very good treatment result. So for the selection of the patient and the drugs, we think AI is quite precise and successful. And also it could evaluate the results of the treatment. We can have AI to do the analysis, and it could show the effect of the drug. So we think in the future for the application of AI, it will play a very key role.
With the ability to access a wealth of data from ALS patients, artificial intelligence could process a lot of the information that could take doctors years or months to proceed. So let's talk about this, the data sharing aspect of collaboration, because we know that doctors, they rely on data to learn about the disease and to find out best treatment possibilities for their patients. How critical is data sharing in helping doctors expand their understanding of this?
Data sharing is so important, and we know that people living with the illness, they tell us that they want their data shared so that people can learn about the illness faster. And so there's the will from the patients, from the scientists. There are some country by country restrictions that can make it difficult, and those are the things I think together as a field we need to advocate strongly, to be able to share data across countries and across different regions.
And Professor Ludov, would you share with us some initiatives or platforms that you've taken note of in terms of sharing this critical information of ALS patients?
Yeah, we are doing this for years with Professor Fan. We have compared, for example, the genetics and phenotypes of FLD mutations in China and Germany, or FUS mutations. We have compared the life expectancy and the speed, how the disease develops in China and Germany. We have looked at the phenotypes, which amount of patients start with difficulties speaking and swallowing. There are differences, for example, there are differences in China and in Germany. So this is the basis for application of these new powerful technology.
And of course, Professor Gittler, we know that collaboration is such a pivotal part of our research. Can you perhaps share some insights into how data sharing and your partnership with international institutions?
So data sharing, as the others have said, is really critical. People living with ALS, they don't care if a drug is discovered in Germany or China or United States. They just want the best medicines to help them and their family. And my laboratory is an international laboratory. We have the top scholars from around the world come to work with us, and we have collaborations in China and all over the world. And that's the only way that we'll solve the disease is by working together and sharing data, and more important, sharing ideas. We don't know where the next big, great idea will come from. So I think we have to look everywhere.
Mm-hmm. And then, Dr. Sekovich, we know that during your recent talk at Huashan Hospital in Fudan University, you said that true breakthroughs come not only in scientific progress, but also global collaboration and this humanistic spirit among physicians. Now, in international and multidisciplinary research, what would you say about the work or the contributions from Chinese doctors and scientists?
The science that is coming from the scientists in China is just outstanding. And we've had long-term relationship with Professor Fan and many of his colleagues. I see so much innovation in drug discovery, in the ability to get these treatments to patients and to share that information globally. Tofersen is a great example that we could not have done that trial if it wasn't a global trial. Because it's a rare disease and we needed every person living with that illness to have the option to be part of trial and for us to share that data. And we're going to see more and more of these trials really need to go globally, and discoveries being made in China as well as other parts of Asia and Europe. Dr. Gittler recently hosted a conference in Shanghai, and it was just a phenomenal, one of the best conferences I've been to of idea sharing and science coming from so many people in China and also in other parts of the world that were invited to that conference.
Mm-hmm. And now I'd like to share with you some a comparative study of over 2,000 Chinese patients and over 3,000 patients in Germany in terms of their lifespan, their survival time. And they could do better than 5 years, and that's really much longer than the commonly perceived 3 to 5 years. What do you think are some of the contributing factors?
So
we have to consider the comprehensive treatment methods. So because years ago, and we have like trainings overseas in the ALS center, and also we are getting a lot of trainings, and after we come back to China, we are actually improve our capability for the ALS, for example, to provide support in the nutrition and also some psychological support. All of these can help our patients to expand their life expectancy. So as we compare our situation with Germany, we will see the life expectation is quite similar. But we have to look at, this is actually the data coming from like Peking University, the third hospital. So we will say the population we have to pay more close attention to. But if we also have to look at the situation all over China. So in China, for the incidence rate, and also we have to look at the survival rate. However, this rate is quite low, it's less than 2%. That means the incidence rate is not very high, but still we are seeing that we have a lot of people suffer from this kind of disease. So we have the newly added patients, and also we have the total number of the patients in China. So we are seeing that for this 2% is extremely low. So at a national level, we don't see this figure is quite optimistic. So this time for the National Neurology Center, we also established a new ALS center. So each year we would like to provide like trainings all over China, connecting all the resources to improve the level of the treatment and also to provide the service.
So Professor Ludov, just want to a follow-up question with you here on this research. Does your experience with ALS patients in Germany align with this finding of longer survival time?
Yeah, I totally agree with my colleagues. Tofersen is a breakthrough, but the basis is symptomatic treatment. And this has two major aspects, perhaps even more, but I see the major aspects in two: the ventilation skills that we developed. Non-invasive ventilation prolongs life and improves quality of life. And of course, there's also some news or major news with regard to nutrition of ALS patients, which seems to prolong life and slow down decline of the patients. Mm-hmm. This is a basis.
Yes. Professor Fan here also mentioned this multidisciplinary team, this cooperation. Just how important is it, Professor Gittler, in terms of patients as well as doctors dealing with this disease?
The evidence shows that these multidisciplinary teams and centers really do improve the survival and the quality of life of people with ALS. And Dr. Sukovich can comment more on what her team does and the impact.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the impact is quite huge, and it's so important to offer this multidisciplinary care, and that includes, the neurologists, but also pulmonary physicians, palliative care physicians, and other healthcare providers like nurses, physical therapists, respiratory therapists. People with ALS have a lot of symptoms, and we can help those symptoms, like Professor Ludolf mentioned, nutrition, but you need a whole team with that expertise. And so we're lucky to have those type of centers. The challenge, of course, is supporting them and figuring out the finances, but we know that it makes patients live longer and it improves their quality of life.
Mm-hmm. And now we discussed some medicines that's used in treating ALS, but what are some of the limitations of the current therapies that we have?
Yeah, I think the obvious limitation of the breakthrough drug tofersen is that it only works in SOD patients, which is one of 1,000 in Germany. And the limitation of the established drug riluzole is that it only expands lifespan by 3 months if you have a life expectancy of 1 year. This is at least what the study in the 90s tells us. This is a limitation which we have to see and have to improve.
And your thoughts on this, Dr. Gittler?
Professor Ludolf is correct. The SOD1 drug only works on people with a mutation in that gene. But I think the breakthrough is so encouraging because it proves that the disease is treatable. I don't think that was known or wasn't even clear before this. It shows someone can stop the disease and even start to get better. I think that is the breakthrough. And it gives us encouragement that once we solve what causes the other parts of the disease, the other cause of the disease, we can make medicines. There's another gene called FUS, which Professor Fan works on and others. And this is unfortunately a gene that when mutated causes a very early form of ALS in children. And there's a new breakthrough medicine that's being tested around the world that seems to be able to stop that disease in children. So I think one by one, we'll identify the genes that cause ALS and we can make medicines to slow down or stop the disease. So the limitation is that we need to know more about how the disease works.
Can I also get your thoughts on this, Professor Sukovich?
Yes, I mean, I do think that we're fortunate that we do have some drugs on the market that help people with ALS, that slow down the illness. But the problem is we need drugs that have a big impact, like tofersen, that really can stop and slow down really dramatically. And for that to happen, we need better understanding of the biology and better ways to deliver treatments to the brain, like Professor Gittler mentioned earlier. But that's what people are working on now. That's what left me with excitement after the meeting in Shanghai about all the innovation on understanding the biology and developing better treatments to go into trials.
Mm-hmm. And then what are some of the critical unmet needs that doctors in this field must prioritize in their future collaboration? Professor Ludolf.
Yeah, I think the tofersen effect is even bigger because we discovered, or we seemed to discover, a marker which predicts the effect of a drug, the so-called neurofilaments, the axonal marker. As I mentioned before, I think this is not the last step in a predictive marker. And if this holds true, we can be much faster in the development of drugs, also for sporadic ALS. And that is an unmet need to develop these markers.
So what Dr. Ludoff was saying, I think, is so important, because when you give a medicine that you don't know if it works or not, how do you know if it's working in a complicated disease like ALS? So scientists have been able to discover proteins and molecules in a person's blood or some fluid that is around the spinal cord and measure those molecules in there, and they could see the bad ones going down if the drug is working, the good ones going up. And so this is a way of knowing if your drug is quickly working, and if it's not working, you stop it, you try another drug. So I think that was the real breakthrough.
Yeah, and I think Professor Fan here also shares with the colleagues here, the doctors here, in believing that there's currently no cure for ALS, but it's treatable. It's not curable, but it's treatable. What are some of the challenges or limitations of the current therapies that in future collaborations doctors should prioritize and work on together?
因为我们现在这个治疗呢，更多
So
的
right
是
now,
延
for
长
our therapies, we just try to extend the life expectancies for our patients. But at the same time, we want to improve the life quality for the patients. For example, to provide support for the nutrition and also the respiratory support. If they're not very good at the respiration, so then maybe we should use ventilators, and also we should try to improve their nutrition as well. However, if the ALS come to the later stage, there is a big challenge. For the patients, it's difficult for them to communicate because they are not able to speak or write. It's hard for them to communicate with others. But right now, we may have some equipment devices, for example, to monitor the change of their eyes and to see what kind of the communication. But it is very low efficiency. And in the future, we may have more discovery about the brain-computer interface to improve the quality of the life of the patients, because this will connect with the patient's cognition so that they can use this interface to communicate their thoughts and ideas. So in the later stage for the ALS patients, if we could use this technology, it could help them to improve their life quality. It is an opportunity, also a challenge.
Do other doctors also share with Professor Fan and some of the best ways to improve the life quality of the patients? Can we begin with Dr. Tsakovich?
Yes, I think there's, as Professor Fan said, there's so much we can do to improve people's quality of life. Communication being number one, nutrition, breathing support. We have the technologies to really help people with that. And more recently, we've seen a lot of what we call brain-computer interface technology, the ability with little microchips in the brain to be able to help people who can't move control a wheelchair or a robotic arm or a communication. We're going to see more and more of that for ALS as people live longer or choose to live longer, and to keep them able to communicate and be part of their families and their work.
Mm-hmm. What about the exoskeleton? Could I also get your insights, Dr. Gittler, in this regard and supporting this whole support system for ALS patients?
It seems like a futuristic, but the future comes quicker now that we have scientific breakthroughs. So anything that can help someone living with ALS to move around, like that technology, definitely helps.
And yes, Professor Ludoff?
Yeah, exoskeletons are beginning to be used in ALS care, also in our clinic here. It could be helpful in preserving, in particular, the ability to walk and prevent falls, which is a danger for the patient.
Mm-hmm. Now, for patients with ALS, they have mixed reactions at diagnosis. Some are devastated, some turn out to be believers. They're really strong-willed. They believe that they could make a difference. We have a lot of stories like that. I'm sure that Professor Tsakovich and Professor Fan here, Professor Ludoff and Professor Gittler, you all have come across patients with strong wills and beliefs that they could make a difference. But then it is a race against time, right? Time is really scarce for them, something that this is a death sentence that they have to face. Are the initiatives or these efforts, new therapies, out of reach as we speak?
I don't think they're out of reach for people today. That's the excitement and the hope. And I'm always so amazed by the people I have the privilege to care for about how even in the face of such a serious illness, they and their families are resilient and hopeful and want to be part of research and part of the solutions, not just for themselves, but for others. It really is a global effort from the patients and the doctors to find cures for this illness and the scientists. So I think that even today there are exciting therapies out there that will go to trials that people can participate in. So I personally don't think it's out of reach.
And then Professor Fan, this is a race against time, but trials and the research of new medicine really takes a lot of time. Is there any way to really speed up the process?
我们的这个，因为在这个 ALS 的意志性非常强嘛，所以我
So
们
some of the patients have very strong will.
病人精细的分层，然后
So we need to, for example, to segment all these patients and also to work with them. And also we will try to apply some of the new research to our clinical trials.
因为这个虽然是个罕见病，它实
So
际上
even though it is ALS is a rare disease, but in China, as regard to the population, we are seeing each year we have over like 20,000 people, new patients for the ALS. We try to use a clinical trial to find the new drugs to treat these patients. I think this is very urgent for us.
Just how urgent is it, Professor Ludolf, in trying to find new therapies and new treatment options for patients?
Yeah, it's obviously very urgent, but it was always. I'm in ALS research for 40 years, so you don't have to overreact, to have to see the reality. I think the best option to speed up trials are, like I said before, are the development of biomarkers which react to a given principle of therapeutics and predict, perhaps after 3 or 6 months, this is possible in my view, and predict the success so you can speed up the process.
And Dr. Gittler, is there any way to really shorten the research time to make a breakthrough and eventually make a big change in ALS treatment?
I think the emergence of AI in biomedical research is really helping us accelerate combing through large amounts of data and focusing on the ones that are the most informative. And I think that together with some of the innovative clinical trials that Dr. Sukovich is pioneering, that's also speeding up testing medicines.
And then since we mentioned the fact that you all come across patients with ALS, what significance or broader significance do these individuals hold for the bigger group of patients who are, suffering from the same disease?
我们这个还是回到这个 Thompson 给我
So
们的这
coming
个
back
启
to
示，
the
就是如果我
Thompson,
们
the
找到
inspiration
了
we got,
这个准确的
for example,
病因
if we
以后，
find
实际上我们就可以把
the root
部分
causes
病
of
人
this
至少这部
disease,
分病
the
人是可以甚至治疗好
pathogenesis, so we have the confidence
那
to
当然 ALS 是个意志性
treat
很
these
强，它有不同的
patients.
原因。但通
But
过我们的
of
机
course,
制
for
的
some
研究，
people,
那么我们
they
会
do
发
have
现越
strong
来
will
越
and
多的
also
发现一
this
些相关的机制。当然，这些病人呢，他可能就
pathogenesis
是
is complicated.
它不是一个单纯的
Maybe we can find more different mechanism, but ALS is a very complicated disease. But we can try to break down this disease, and we try our best to find the suitable strategies targeting different ALS patients. Even though one size cannot fit all, but maybe we can target it like certain group of the ALS patients, just like Thompson, we can treat certain patients, and we believe in the end we can conquer all of these difficulties. So as you face a lot of ALS patients, for example, for some of them they have a strong will. For example, Mr. Cai Lei is one of the examples.
他们有这样
So
强
for
大的
this
信
kind
心
of patients,
他
they
们
have strong
在患病的过
determination.
程当中不断的去叩
Even
问或
though
者反
they're
思生命。
suffering
您
from
能从他们身上
ALS,
获
but
取
still they reflect themselves
蔡
and
磊是个
how
非
to
常
live a
特殊的
better
人
life.
因
So
为
蔡磊 is
他
quite
不光
special
是
for
关
us
心自己的身
because
体
for
情况，
him,
自己的病
it
情
is does
那
not
他是
only
一个
focus
这
on
个病的
himself,
小孩，他
he
得了
also
病以
pays a
后，他
lot of
认为他的使
attention
命就是要
to this disease, the
对于一个病
ALS.
人来说，
So
对于
he
他们来
carries this
说是非常
mission
不
to
容易。
conquer
那么他
the
组织了很
ALS.
多
It is a very
利用
tough
自己的
job
能
for
力和
him.
资源，
He
在这
used
个
his
推
own
进
resources
在中国甚至全球
and
的
in
ALS
China
的
and
这
in
样的
the
一个
global
病
endeavor,
因为
he
我个人觉得
contributed
非
his
非
own
常到
efforts.
这个感佩的是，他在中
What
国
touched
文
me
化的背
most
景
is
下
that
来
under
动
the
员了
Chinese
我们有
culture,
1000名
he
以上
also
的 ALS
mobilized
患者
over 1,000
签署
ALS
死后
patients.
捐
They
献
signed
脑
agreement.
是用于科学研究。
For example,
这个在
after
中国的
they
文化
pass
里面是
away, he
很
will
困难的。
donate
所以中国
their
医生很难跟病人去
remains. And for example, for the Chinese doctors, it's very difficult to talk about this with the patients. But right now, we have
病人的这个死亡
over 1,000 people signed this agreement, and in the future, we will receive some of the remains of these people, and this will have a lot of significance for our scientific research, and this will help us to move along with our ALS studies.
So, Professor Takovich, let me also get your thoughts on this because we know that you are with this Sean Healy and AMG Center, and you know Sean Healy is a very successful businessman who also shares with Mr. Cailai in trying to make a difference, making his fair share of contribution to this field of research and treatment of ALS. Tell us what broader significance individuals like these people hold for the future of ALS.
Mr. Kai and Mr. Healy and people like them who have donated their time and their brain, their brain power and their philanthropy to help others make a huge impact. The Healy Center, for example, Mr. Healy funded it with his friends in order to start the first platform trial in ALS and also to fund young scholars in ALS all over the world to bring and attract the new talent and to give out awards to people innovating and doing new discoveries. And the impact of his philanthropy has helped thousands of people all over the world. And the same for Mr. Kai and for several other people. We're not going to be able to cure this illness without significant funding and global collaborations. And that's what that type of money and innovation and kindness can really do to help everybody living with this illness.
And
In
Professor
the United
Gittler,
States-
yes, go ahead.
In the United States, I volunteer for some ALS research organizations, but in my recent trip to Beijing, I met with Cailai and his organization, and he inspired a team of young computer scientists and engineers to come just work with, and just getting to meet with him and his team was so inspiring for me. I want to volunteer and work with Cailai's organization, and I think the efforts they're doing is going to be on a global scale to move ALS research forward.
Dr. Ludolf, how valuable are these individuals' kindness and the spirit of sharing in promoting our understanding of ALS?
I admire them, and we need motors for a small, comparatively small field of a rare disease in which the victims come and go. That is something you need, a constant factor like such motors, and therefore, we need them.
And of course, our patients and our doctors around the world are in this together. I'd like to thank you, every one of you, for this very engaging discussion. And let me thank our panel again. Professor Fan Dongsheng, appreciate your thoughts. And Professor Mary Takovich, Albert Ludolf, and Aaron Gittler. We appreciate sharing with us your expertise and insights.
Good to be with you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
谢谢。
谢谢。